Hi, my name is Zach Wepfer, and I'm a senior recruiter supporting global IT at the Coca-Cola Company. I'm proud to introduce a video in which we'll hear from James Quincy, Chairman and CEO of the Coca-Cola Company, discuss his perspective and actions we are taking regarding social justice.
George Floyd, killed, murdered. A senseless tragedy for him and his family. Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Yolanda Castile, Sandra Bland, Freddie Gray, Michael Brown, Eric Gardner, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, all killed. All Black Americans, predominantly male Black Americans, all of whom should be alive today. I, like you, like Laurie, am outraged, sad, frustrated, and angry. Companies like ours must speak up as allies to the Black Lives Matter movement. We stand with those seeking justice and equality. Reality is that there is still a wound in the fabric of America, a wound that is not just not healed, but is being reopened. Racism. It begets violence and it begets death. It's nearly 30 years since the video of Rodney King being beaten by police officers shocked the world. At that time, we spoke out. Roberto Goizueta, then chairman and CEO of the Coca-Cola Company, said at an event, defending justice, creating economic opportunity, and ensuring quality education is more than a noble cause. It is our duty. Nothing we value, our families, homes, and businesses, are safe in the face of oppression, poverty, and ignorance. It is our duty.
I'm proud our CEO has chosen to take this issue head on, and I hope that all of the participants will visit the website to hear the full speech. Hello, my name is Sharita Shelby, and I'm the incoming Coca-Cola Tag Board Chair. I also serve on the board of TAG's BPM Society. I'm happy to introduce our moderator, Roy Hadley, for our next panel, Social Justice in the Workplace, an Uncomfortable Conversation. Roy is special counsel at the law firm of Adams and Reese, LLP. He serves on the TAG board, and he also chairs the Information Security Society. I am so excited to hear from the panelists on this important and timely topic. Roy, over to you.
Hello and welcome back to our session here at Converge. Today we're going to talk about a topic, social justice in the workplace. Sometimes an uncomfortable conversation, however, a necessary conversation. As seen by our recent election, these issues will not go away. These are going to be front and center in our country going forward, front and center in our workplaces, and quite frankly, front and center in our homes. I'm Roy Hadley. I am the chair of the Information Security Society for the Technology Association of Georgia. I'm also on the TAG board, and my day job, I'm a lawyer at the law firm of Adams and Reese. Today we're joined by three excellent panelists. You're really going to enjoy the conversation. They've been at the forefront of the social justice conversation and the social justice fight at their respective companies. First, we have Chloe Barzey, who is the office managing director at Accenture here in Atlanta. We also have Lashaun Solomon, who is the manager, skills development at Effectv. And then lastly, but certainly not least, we're joined by Stacie Hagan, who is a former chief people officer at SecureWorks. All of these panelists are really, just again at the forefront of it. Social justice, though, what does that mean? Everybody has kind of a definition of social justice. So I'm going to let my panelists think about it, but I'm going to ask them to just give me a little bit more about their background and, you know, kind of what they have done at their companies in prior lives, those sorts of things that brought them here to this panel today. So we're going to start with you, Chloe. Just a little bit about your background, please.
Sure. So I am, as you said, Roy, responsible for our relationships here in the Atlanta community with our clients, our people, which we have over 3,000 people in the Atlanta and surrounding community, as well as our relationship with our community partners. And that's important because really that engagement with our clients, our people, and our community really embodies who we are here at Accenture. And the social justice topic is very important to us because at Accenture, our ambition is to be the most inclusive company in the world.
Fantastic. Lashaun, Effectv, tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Well, at Effectv, which is a Comcast company, my team oversees the learning and development for the advertising sales teams across the enterprise. And as far as my involvement when it comes to social justice, I've spent 12 years in the media, technology, and telecommunications industry. And I've also been very involved in a number of organizations, one of them being Women in Cable Telecommunications. It's been around for over 40 years. And this organization has chapters all over the US and also in Europe. And I've been a part of it as a board of director and most recently served as chapter president for the Southeast for my entire career. And the reason why I'm so passionate about that is because when I first heard about this organization, I saw that there was something missing. More women that looked like me leading the organization. And it helped to propel me and to motivate me to get more engaged and to also engage other women of color to take part in this organization and to benefit from its professional development programs.
Okay, fantastic. Some good stuff. We're going to come back and unpack that in a minute. I heard some really good nuggets there. Stacie, tell us a little bit about you and what you've done and what you're doing now.
Hi, Roy. Thanks for inviting me to be a part of this panel. And with these great professional women here, I'm looking forward to learning from them as well. I am recently retired, as you mentioned, so I'm figuring out that next chapter and what that looks like. I most recently served as the Chief People Officer for SecureWorks for the last 5 years. SecureWorks is a leading global cybersecurity company. It is publicly traded, but it is also majority owned by Dell Technologies. And in my role, I was able to frankly leverage and learn a lot from my Dell colleagues. Dell Technologies has taken a position very much in the forefront of diversity and inclusion, setting some 2030 goals that they expect to achieve, reporting annually on their progress. So that was a great environment to be a part of and work in. I also was Chief People Officer for Earthlink I was there 13 years. I was also an operations executive there. And during that time, I think is when I joined the TAG board. So I'm a longtime member of the TAG board and a former chair of the board. And so I'm glad even in moving to my retirement that I can be involved in important initiatives like this through that TAG professional community. So excited to be here.
Fantastic. And, you know, just full disclosure, Stacie and I work together on, kind of diversity initiatives with the TAG board. So really excited to be working with her. Stacie, let's stay with you for a second here. And when we say social justice, that's such a broad term. It encompasses so many things. What does it mean to you? What, if I said define it, and, Lashaun and Chloe, I'm going to come to you also, but if I said define it in, a couple of sentences, what would you say social justice means to you?
Well, social justice is obviously a big, broad concept, and I know we're going to talk about it some in the workplace here in this conversation, but just as when I try to think about that broad concept, it's really about the relationship between the individual and society, reflecting an equitable access to resources, to opportunities, to social activities. That's the sort of, albeit amorphous, but sort of conceptual definition that I think about with social justice.
Chloe, social justice.
I just think of it simply as social justice is when people in a company feel like they can thrive and be their authentic self. It's supporting the people in the company as well as the people in the community. And so when you know you have a good social justice program in your company, when you have transparency, when you provide people in your workplace support and people in the community support, and when you're transparent about all of that.
Okay, fantastic. And then Lashaun, Lashaun, I'm going to unpack a little bit early about what you said earlier. So what social justice means to you, and you talked about your work with women in cable TV, and how is the conversation about social justice different now than it was, say, 5 years ago or 10 years ago? Because some of these concepts are the same, right?
Yes, I completely agree. And I would first start with what does social justice mean to me? And I would categorize into 3 words: equality for all. Stacie spoke to this. And then Chloe also mentioned the importance for employees to feel like they can bring their authentic selves to work. It should not be a privilege to feel safe at work. I think it's a requirement, because if you can't feel safe at work, how can you be productive? It's almost counterintuitive. And as far as just my engagement with other organizations, I'm very passionate about being able to advocate for those who just don't know where to start, and helping them get the tools and the resources and the information and access that they need in order to compete. And that's also been a big part of my involvement with the TAG D&I Society as well, and just helping to further elevate the different initiatives that we're propelling forward, and then helping to bring a diversity in voices and recognition.
Fantastic, good stuff. So I think, all of us here can agree that social justice is a necessary conversation, and it is a conversation that is here and now and will be really moving forward. So we can agree on that, but now let's talk about what can be done. How can we really start moving the needle and moving the conversation to impact and having something that actually means something and does something. So Chloe, I'm going to start with you. Accenture, big company. All 3 of your companies are big companies, but big company. What is Accenture doing? What have you done, Accenture, to really kind of frame the conversation around social justice and also to actually have a meaningful impact in that area?
I'm excited because Accenture is doing a lot in this area. It started in 2016 when there was the killing of Philando Castile. We started having those open dialogues, those town halls where we could really talk about what was going on in the community. But as time went on, and as with the killing of George Floyd, it was clear that there just wasn't enough being done by the business community. So conversations aren't enough. That's just the starting point, is to be open to the dialogue and having those difficult conversations. But if you want to make meaningful change, there are a lot more steps that have to be taken. So the next step is really empathy, really understanding, taking the steps to understand, put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand what they're feeling and how they're feeling. And that takes training. It takes time. It takes a commitment to zero tolerance against injustice for all. And I'm excited because we've gotten that from our chair of the board, our CEO, our global management committee. We have an unwavering commitment to equality and justice for all, with zero tolerance for bigotry and hate. So we're taking steps to fight racism, create more opportunities for employment and advancement for our people in ethnically diverse communities. We have a lot that we're doing with our communities. We're strengthening our ties with the communities that we're in and our partners, our ecosystem partners, to create more opportunities to support inclusion and diversity. Some of the things we do, we committed to training. So there is anti-racism training, and that's a requirement for all. We started with unconscious bias training, and that just wasn't enough. And we realized that people really have to understand what racism is so that they can understand how to address it and how to then create a community where everyone can thrive. We've set goals and targets, and it's a business priority for us to have inclusion and diversity. It's not just something we talk about. Our management committee has made that part of everyone's goals. And so it's a business priority that's then cascaded down to everybody to support inclusion and diversity, because we know that to be an innovative company, it's necessary. The days where you have to write a business case for inclusion and diversity are gone. At this point, it's a business priority. If you want to have a company that's innovative, you have got to really support inclusion and diversity.
So Stacie, Dell, as you mentioned, SecureWorks, a part of Dell. Big company, does a lot in terms of diversity and those sorts of things. What are some of the things that you did at SecureWorks that Dell did in this area around social impact and kind of the conversation and quite frankly, meaningful actions at the company?
Right. Companies like Dell Technologies and Accenture and Comcast, I mean, these are significantly sized organizations, many of which have had diversity and inclusion programs for years, where they've said, look, we need to look like and reflect the communities in which we work and we serve. And so to Lashaun's point, you many times start with data and say, are we there? Well, if we're not there, what are the actions that we're going to be taking to make sure that we look like the community in which we live and, frankly, the one that we serve? And that's interesting when you start thinking about global companies, too, because it takes on many, many different forms. I think that is the easier component or effort to measure, not necessarily to achieve, but to measure and track progress. I think the inclusion part is so much more difficult, and that's where we spend a lot of time at SecureWorks and in my prior companies as well. Inclusion is about not only do we have diversity represented in our workforce, but do all people feel that they have a seat at the table, that their voice matters, that they participate at the right level in issues and decisions that impact them and their well-being, their career trajectory? That's harder to measure. It's very much a cultural component. That's why when Chloe said, and Lashaun echoed, it starts at the top. It has to be championed at the top of the organization. But we also, I think in my recent companies and in most companies today, we're still learning how to measure, are we achieving inclusion effectively? And I think when we are, that's when we'll start to feel like we have achieved some advanced or better level of social justice in the workplace.
And thanks. That's a fantastic answer. And one of the words that you said, inclusion, it being difficult to measure and being, kind of that amorphous term, because how do you measure inclusion? How do you make sure somebody feels welcome, somebody feels wanted, somebody feels that what they're saying and doing is valued? And so, Chloe, I'm going to come to you, and then Lashaun, I'm going to follow up with you. What do you think about inclusion, and is that really a difficult thing to implement? And if it's not, what is the most difficult part about social justice and bringing social justice to the forefront? Chloe?
That was a few questions.
That's right. I'll let you take them off one by one. We can talk about inclusion first.
So in terms of metrics, inclusion is really looking at the representation in a company. So it's the representation at all levels and looking to see if that representation reflects the communities that you're in. And then, as you look at the overall representation, that's just one aspect. The other aspect that's key is the leadership. and looking at that leadership and making sure that the leadership represents inclusion and diversity. Because a lot of times companies have, inclusion at the lower levels. And as you get up to the higher levels, you start seeing less and less of that. And that's why we set targets not only across the board, but also at the leadership levels, because that's where it also matters. Employees want to work for companies where they see diverse leaders. And so that's very important as you think about recruiting, retention, and really making an impact for your company is looking at it across all levels. And what was that next question you asked me?
Stacie had mentioned that, inclusion was one of the more difficult aspects of social justice in the workplace. My question to you was, do you agree with that? Or is there something else that you would say is also a difficult part of implementing a social justice plan at the workplace?
I think the most difficult part of implementing a social justice plan in the workplace is that it's not one size fits all. So everyone is different. And if you want to create a community in the workplace where people believe they can thrive and people believe that they can contribute to the community around them, you've got to really look at the individual groups that you're serving and really listen and understand what's important to them. When we first started working with ERGs and really thinking about what's important to the people, even in our ERGs, employee resource groups, we noticed that even within those employee resource groups, and some people call them business resource groups, and those are the groups that are focused on a particular community, but they are also have a business aspect to them. Everyone in those groups are not alike. So you really have to take the time to understand and listen to what's important to your employees and understand how to make an impact for them, because everyone's not the same. I think that's the most difficult part. There's no one answer for everybody.
Gotcha. Thank you. Lashaun, I saw you shaking your head in the affirmative. So, two things for you. One is, kind of going back to the difficult part of implementing a social justice, concept at a company, kind of what you think is difficult about that. And then, I saw you shaking your head even more with the employee resource groups, the ERGs. And so we're going to come back to those with you and really get your thoughts on, are they beneficial? Do they help? And if you think they do, how do you set an effective one up? So first question, I'll let you go to that one before I ask even more.
Okay, so the first one is about employee resource groups?
No, that's the second one. Come on. I'm kidding. No, the first one, you can start with employee resource groups, but the first really about the difficulty in setting up, kind of social justice initiatives. What's the difficult part of it? Stacie, mentioned that inclusion was a difficult metric. Chloe's kind of said some things around it. And so I was just really looking to hear your thoughts on, what you feel are the most difficult parts of kind of framing that conversation and setting up meaningful ways to address it.
For starters, I'm going to define what diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to me. And I would love to hear if Chloe and Stacie, and also you, Roy, if you agree. So diversity. Do we have a diverse mix of people in the room? Are they represented? Inclusion. Do they feel safe? Do they feel welcomed? Do they feel valued? Equity. Do they have access to everything that all employees should have access to in order to continue and grow their career at this company? So if we're looking at our efforts with diversity, equity, and inclusion, how are we answering those questions? And depending on your answer, you can understand what's most difficult. Are we great at bringing in diverse people through the doors at frontline positions, at entry-level positions? But are we challenged with growing their career throughout the company so that way they don't just go one level up? Are we having challenges retaining good talent because they get frustrated and they leave? Or do we bring in diverse talent and they just don't feel safe? They don't feel like they can speak up because we don't have those avenues or those various channels set up in place. And so I think once you can identify and define what those 3 words mean, you can identify where you're having those challenges.
Okay. Stacie, your
I love
reaction.
Lashaun's definitions. I align perfectly with what she described. And it's also important to do what Lashaun just did, because people do have different definitions or interpretations of words. And one of the ways that we sort of set a foundation for inclusion and really allowing people to participate is tell me where you're starting from. You know, I think when we talk about what's difficult, you even started off today, Roy, that this can be an uncomfortable conversation. And a good friend of mine who is an HR leader, I'll borrow her phrase. She said that the racial reckoning that we're going through, she said, corporations cannot policy their way out of this. They have to engage their way into it. So whether that employee resource groups are a great place to start, because they are a great way of hearing the voice of a group of people, even though everyone in that group is going to be different and have unique needs, but to start to surface the issues. And I think an awful lot of people today know that this is such an important conversation, but are really fearful of having it because they're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. They're going to accidentally offend someone because their words were misinterpreted, or maybe they had something to learn. And so I think that when we enter into this effort, that if we do it with compassion for one another, that we're all engaging because we think it's important and we need to learn and we want to learn together. That's a tough thing to do inside of any group, but corporations for sure, where many of us are, we're paid to bring our expertise to the table. So to come to the table and say, I don't know exactly how to solve this, but I want to solve it and I want to learn, is a vulnerable position that I think we have to be willing to enter into.
Great, just fantastic thoughts there. And I think you're right. We are often afraid to have that conversation because you're right. We're afraid that we might offend somebody, say the wrong things, but we have to figure out how to have that system where we can have those conversations, because if we don't, we never will get to, having meaningful impact in our environment. So, Chloe, I am going to come back to you and get your, reaction to Lashaun's initial thoughts, Stacie's kind of follow on to it.
My thought is the definitions were great. Many companies are in different stages on that spectrum of inclusion and diversity. And I think a lot of companies are just at that initial listening phase. Let me listen to my employees. Let me understand what's going on. And what I'd say is I would encourage companies to go past that listening phase and to really make it a business priority, because the listening phase will only get you so far. And when you make it a business priority, when you make it part of your culture and part of the fabric of everything that you do, and that starts with the leadership, but it goes all the way throughout the company. As you think about the middle management, the people that are just coming in, everybody needs to understand that importance of inclusion and diversity, that importance of allowing people to thrive by being their authentic selves. People have to go past that initial listening phase to the action phase. And that's when change really starts to happen. And that's why I'm so excited about what we're doing, because we've gone through that listening phase and we continue to listen, but now it's really about taking tangible actions to make an impact, not only for our people, but in the communities. And when we do that, our employees feel like they're heard. They feel like they have opportunity. They feel like they can make an impact in the community, because that's what employees usually want to do, is not just have a career for themselves, but really, do something impactful outside of the work that they do every day. And so when you provide those opportunities and when you're transparent about what you're doing and what's important, that's when change really starts to happen.
Good stuff. So let me ask you all this. One of the things when over the summer, when we had all of the things that happened around the country, Black Lives Matters, other things. One of the things that I think companies struggled with was the messaging around, do we support this in our advertising? You saw billboards around, the town here in Atlanta, companies coming out and supporting, bringing it back in sometimes, putting it back out, and really struggling with those conversations. And I guess my question to you is, how does a company really kind of weigh that and the brand impact, positive and negative potentially, versus their responsibilities versus what the employees want versus diversity, inclusion? How do those conversations happen? And how would you tell a company that's struggling with that what to do? How do you meaningfully do that? And so that's kind of a long-winded question, as sometimes us lawyers can do. But Stacie, I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
It's a good question. And I have thoughts and opinions, and I'll be the first to say, and I'm not a marketing expert or executive, but I do think of brand in several different ways. As a former chief people officer, I think of it as partly our employment brand. How are we viewed as an employer of choice and a great place to work? And so engaging in these important conversations and taking actions to demonstrate our commitment is critical to the employment brand, and you can't dodge it. If you dodge it, it'll do a lot more damage to your brand. And of course, we know everyone can get on social media and say whatever their experience is with the company today, and that's available to everyone. So I think you have to be conscious and intentional. But I would also say, getting outside of employment brand into a company's reputation or their brand in the communities in which they live and work, and their brand in terms of their products and services that they offer. Whether it's a business to business or a business to consumer type of industry, you're going to engage diverse peoples throughout the world. So how can we do that well and not embrace that diversity inside of our organization? It not only leads to innovation, as one of my colleagues has already brought up, but it really helps us anticipate and understand the unique market needs that we're trying to serve. So to me, embracing social justice and understanding what this means for your business is a fundamental leadership skill.
When I first heard that, it dawned on me, I wonder if companies had a difficult time choosing to be sustainable. Was it a hard decision to implement recycle bins? Was it difficult to think about how your company is impacting the environment? My guess is that it probably wasn't that hard. It was probably a no-brainer, like, yes, let's do that. And I feel that social injustice and taking a stand for that should be the same thing, because it means you are standing up for what is right. You are standing up for your employees. You are standing up for your customers. Because at the end of the day, if social injustice, as we know, it continues to impact certain communities, over time, you won't have anybody to hire. You won't have anyone to purchase your products. So social justice is something that everyone should care about. All businesses should see this as a priority. It's the right thing to do.
Great thoughts. Great analogy, by the way, on the sustainability. Probably not a difficult conversation. So I love that analogy. Chloe, your thoughts. Round us out here.
Yes, it's the right thing to do. So I agree with Lashaun. I mean, it's the right thing to do for a company's clients. It's the right thing to do for the people. It's the right thing to do for the community. It's about humanity. It's not about taking a political stance. It's about being human and what's the right thing to do for human beings. But what I noticed is that this really came to light during the pandemic. When people started talking about the triple threat of COVID, the economy, and systematic or institutional racism, all of that came to the forefront. And that's when people really started noticing it. I think part of it is that people, there were many people that were unaware of some of the injustices. And so I'd say that, there are really 4 key steps if you think about it. There's awareness, there's action, there's accountability, and there's advocacy. If you think about those 4 steps, those are things that companies need to take. And when you take those 4 steps, you get more engagement from your people, you become a real leader in the community. And that's important. And so for companies, as Lashaun said, to be sustainable, that's going to be the baseline for operating in a business society or in business in general, because as she said, people want to work for companies that are ethical. People want to buy from companies that are ethical, and people want to engage with innovative companies. And again, inclusion and diversity foster innovation. And so that's why these things are just critical to the way we need to do business.
Great answer. So we're getting close to the end of our time here. And again, just fantastic panel here, joined by Chloe Barzey, Accenture, Lashaun Solomon, Effectv, and Stacie Hagan, formerly of SecureWorks. One thing, as we round out here, ladies, I would love to get your one last big thought. Your one last thought that you want to give to our listening audience, remembering that we'll have the CEOs listening all the way down to the hourly worker. What's your one thought on what should we be thinking about doing, whatever, with respect to social justice? Lashaun, I'm going to start with you.
Social justice isn't the responsibility of one person. It's the responsibility for everybody. Yes, your company may have a chief diversity officer, which is great. They're at the helm. They're helping to drive that strategy, open doors. But they have an entire team behind them, and then also all the employees that have to support that cause as well. So when you think about social justice, don't sequester it to say, oh, that's only for one group to manage, because it's for everybody to champion.
It creates a workplace that unleashes innovation, encourages people to bring their authentic selves to work so that people can feel seen and heard, and that will create more opportunity for all. All tides can rise together.
First, I love those answers, and I'll pick up on Lashaun too, that it doesn't belong to an individual or a group. It's the responsibility of everyone. I would add to that social justice in the workplace is not an initiative or a program. It has to be the way we live and breathe and work. It is in our culture. It's like water to fish, right? It has to be the environment that we're swimming in. And that means there are no quick fixes, urgent actions, yes, but we're going to need to be having these conversations and staying intentional for many generations to come.
I appreciate you all being here on the panel. I also appreciate you in the audience listening to us today. Social justice in the workplace is oftentimes a very uncomfortable conversation. But as you glean those nuggets from the panel here today, it doesn't have to be. I think what you heard today said that it's everybody's responsibility to be a part of the conversation, and it's everybody's responsibility to be a part of the solution. And only rowing together will our collective boat go forward. So with that, I'm going to close it out. Again, I'm Roy Hadley. We appreciate it on behalf of TAG, on behalf of the D&I Society, which Lashaun does a lot of work with at TAG. Thank you again for joining us today. Take care.